Howdy everyone, welcome back to whatever this is. I think just generic commentary on, political and philosophical things. Typically videos like these involve people calling me a pseudo-intellectual loser and then pretending that that's a question. But today we have people actually asking questions, so I get to be nice. Except one of them I probably won't be nice because it's a stupid question, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I think all of these comments are from TikTok, and I usually just answer questions over there as I get them, but I haven't had a lot of free time as of late, and so I've just decided to save them all up and do them in one video. I think maybe I'll try to upload them over there, but I have an iPhone. It's literally like trying to, I don't know, something that's difficult. My mind on one extreme is just going to like the DMV, but I don't really find the DMV to be difficult. And then like I'm trying to form some joke about something about like sacrificing your firstborn, but you get it. iPhones suck. TikTok sucks. It all sucks. So I guess what I should say instead of all this borderline schizophrenic ramblings is if you enjoy the video, let me know and I can do more videos like this. If you guys have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. But that being said, let's just go ahead and get to these comments. Our first comment is, hey, I've been facing this situation where this other person... I don't know if it's rude to read these comments as they're written. Maybe it is. I don't know. I'm typically a very verbatim type of person, you know? Hey, I've been facing this situation where this other person frequently accuses me of the whataboutism fallacy. I would love your take on that fallacy and when something is not that fallacy. Well, there's not really a lot of context there to work with. First, I mean, how do I feel about it? I can't really say that I feel any way about it. It is a little bit more rhetorical than I would like most fallacies to be, because when somebody says fallacy, the implication is we're talking about a logical fallacy, and logic and rhetoric are two separate things. So whether or not somebody is trying to distract from an argument has very little to... I guess before I talk too much, I should explain what whataboutism is. I almost skimmed right over that because I feel like the name kind of gives it away. For example, if you're talking about like a political opponent and you say this person did that, it's bad, and then the person says, well, what about the other opponent who also did those things or did worse things or whatever, what have you, you know? And so as I was saying, I don't really think it matters all too much if somebody is trying to distract from the argument by saying, well, what about this argument? In terms of logic, it just matters whether or not this thing that the person is bringing up is relevant to the original argument. And more specifically, like if the person is trying to present it as though it is relevant to the argument, because then you can say that it is a logical fallacy. But people get this really like entitled and pseudo-intellectual mindset where like if you change the argument from what I want to talk about, then that's a fallacy. And it's like, no, we can talk about other things. You don't get to dictate what we're talking about like that. I mean, maybe you do in terms of a good faith argument, you know, there's some idea of what is a productive argument and how do you go about having a productive argument. But logic you can think of as being like more of the math of the situation. It doesn't care about rhetoric. It doesn't care about epistemology. It doesn't care about any of that. It is about whether or not through an argument, the conclusion follows from the premise. And so like the example I gave, I honestly don't even know, depending on context, if you would say that that is a fallacy. And so if you ever get people accusing you of making whataboutisms, the analogy or a thought experiment I like to give is this. Imagine that we're like on a cart going down a rail and we're about to pass a lever that we can use to switch where the cart is going. One of the directions, the direction that we are already heading if we don't flip the lever, is going to go off a cliff and we are going to die. The other direction derails safely into a small, shallow pool of mud. The problem with people who call out whataboutisms in specific contexts is that I could say, hey, we need to go towards the mud. And then another person in the cart with me can go, well, give me a good reason as to why we should go towards the mud. I don't like mud. I don't want to get dirty. And then I can go, well, because the alternative is death. And in that situation, you wouldn't go, oh, well, that's a whataboutism. You can't talk about this other thing. You can't say, what about this other thing? You have to focus on the traits of this thing and why this thing is preferable. Like, no. And in the same way, when we're talking about which political candidate we're going to vote for, it is okay to say, I'm voting for this person because this person is not the other person. I think just recently, the issue is that this mentality was too unfairly criticized, because really what was happening is people would take like their misinformed takes about who these people are and use them to say, well, this guy is the boogeyman. This guy is literally a fascist, so I want anything other than a fascist. But if you actually had genuinely, honest to God, the reincarnation of Hitler running, and then you said, well, I'm going to vote for anybody other than Hitler, that actually is a logical argument. The problem recently in politics isn't understanding that you can prefer an alternative to something. It's tribalism. It's the fact that we have, a lot of misinformation going around. We have a lot of fear-mongering going around. And those are the bad things, not understanding, hey, this is an alternative to that. Or also, for example, taking somebody and saying, this is the standard by which, this is the standard by which I'm going to compare things. Oh, well, he did that, and if you think that's okay, then this should be okay as well. That's logical consistency. I mean, there's a lot there. If you want me to eventually come back and make a video on this, I probably will, because I have an entire playlist of going over fallacies, but really the response to whether or not something is a whataboutism is going to depend on the context, and you didn't give me the context here, so. Next comment. Should genetically disabled people be allowed to have offsprings given that they'll pass down their disabilities? What's your opinion? Alright guys, I'm ready to take a very controversial and brave stance and say eugenics is bad. Because in this scenario, what am I supposed to do? Like, chemically castrate them? Or what? Like, if instead of saying, are they allowed, you said, should they? Maybe this would be, a trickier question. Because, like, should they be allowed to do it, but should they still not do it? Probably. I guess it really depends on the disability. If you can still have a quality of life, that's okay. But if you're just going to, have a child that's going to suffer for the rest of his or her life, that is kind of like, adoption is a thing, so I don't know. I don't know why you would decide to put that on a child. I think really the only thing I can say though is like, I don't know how to feel about parents who refuse to get treatment for their children. And so like, I think a lot of people don't understand the distinction between eugenics and like, there was a documentary I had to watch in high school biology called like Designer Babies or something like that, where like, if we ever get to that point where we can, prevent people from having these disabilities and the parents choose not to, then maybe, I don't know. I don't know if I'd ever go that far, but that at least is something I'd be more on the fence about rather than just eugenics. Do you support eugenics? No. Yes, there is the good of society. There is not causing harm to others. That is the point of society. But also the point of society is to serve the interests of the individual. And at a certain point, you start to min-max. I need to not throw in random, like, gamer terminology that you guys may not know. At a certain point, you're trying to optimize people too much, and you're just completely undermining the point of society, which is, I wouldn't say rights and liberties, because I think that mentality has gone too far in the other direction. But the point of society is that we come together and work towards our own interests, and so we enshrine rights into our laws, into our constitutions. And you can't just have stuff like this that completely violates the entire purpose of that. What do you think of the evolutionary debunking argument? Never heard it. No idea what you're talking about. I feel like there's probably several of those, so it's a bit vague, so I will respond with something as vague. Do I think evolution in general is true? Yes. You can call it adaptation through natural selection. That has to be true. All of these dog breeds, all of, your vegetables, your fruits, all of these things that have been selectively breeded over time, those are evidence of adaptation. When people really get up in arms about evolution, it's like, that one scene from The Simpsons where Flanders is trying to push a fish back because it's growing legs and walking on land. You can't deny these things. What you can deny, however, is when the same people who say, hey, we don't know what's at the bottom of our ocean, but we know what happened billions of years ago, you can deny their pseudoscience when they just start making things up and pretend, well, like, of course this had to have happened. How do you know? Honestly, like, I've never actually researched that topic, so I'm not going to say, oh, they made it all up, it didn't happen. But at least as far as my limited knowledge on the issue goes, they found bones that were next to bones, that they later found next to other bones, that they later found next to other bones, and they carbon dated all of it and said, well, then clearly we came from a monkey that came from, like, an otter that came from a fish that came from abiogenesis that just somehow happened. And I look at that and I go, like, abiogenesis definitely did not happen. The rest of that, maybe. I wasn't there, so I can't tell you. And maybe that's a bit frustrating, but that's my take on most things that people claim happened billions of years ago, whether it's religion, whether it's science. If you can't give me an a priori argument as to why it had to have happened, I'm not going to believe you. I'm just going to say, could be possible. You want to tell me that evolution exists in general? Well, yeah, I reckon that it has to. If you have an animal in an environment and it has a random mutation, and that random mutation increases its odds of survival, then that over a large scale is going to result in a progressive evolution. That animal is going to become more adapt to that environmental niche. So that cannot be disproven, but anything else, maybe. I don't know. Don't care. Thoughts on moral relativity. Well, unfortunately, in this day and age, people use the terms moral subjectivism and moral relativism synonymously. Synonymously? Is that a word? Synonymously? Yeah. I've had a lot of people who are just not very intelligent who ridicule me for pointing out the difference. For example, one time in a comment, I can't remember what it was about, somebody asked me what it would be called if morality changed from person to person, but that wasn't based on opinion, that was just based on cultural factors, and the answer is moral relativism. But then somebody was like, no, if a thing changes from person to person, that means it's subjective because it's subject to change. And it's like, you can't just say, oh, well, this includes the word that I'm using, so I'm right. It's the dumbest way that people argue these days. I've given this example in previous videos. Inflammable means flammable because you can't just use prefixes, you can't just use whatever to infer the meaning of a word. Words just have their own meanings. Subjective has like 3 definitions. It's evolved over time. Originally with like Immanuel Kant and Descartes, I think it was. It meant that you are the thinking subject. That became, in philosophy, whether or not a thing is mind dependent. And now we have sort of the definition of, is it based on opinion or is it actual fact? If it's based on actual fact, it's objective. If it's based on opinion, it's subjective. And so the issue is that using all these definitions, if I have allergies or if I have a disease or if my height is different from other people, that doesn't mean that those things are subjective. My height isn't a matter of opinion. It isn't dependent on my mind. The measurements we use may be social constructs, but objectively I am a certain height, so are you, so is everyone else. And that varies from person to person. It would only not vary from person to person if it was universal, not objective, because it is an objective fact that I am as tall as I am, I have the skin color that I do, I look as I do, these are physical traits of mine. If something is the same for everyone, then it's universal. If it changes based on context, then it is relative. Time, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, for example, is relative. It's not Einstein's theory of subjectivism. So what do I think about moral subjectivism? It's one of the worst ideologies that you can possibly have. I've made several videos on it. I will make more videos on it. I don't know if anybody cares about this, but right now I'm kind of making videos on materialism just because it's like, I don't know, it's easy for me to focus on one topic and then once I feel like I'm done, move on to the next topic. So I've been going empiricism, postmodernism, Marxism and subjectivism, which means it could be years from now. I don't know, I might change that up a bit because I might eventually get caught up on writing scripts, so I'll just have the scripts ready and then I can release them in an order that is, in an order that provides more variety rather than just being like, here are 5 videos about determinism. But yeah, subjectivism, bad. Relativism, I don't care. Like, this may surprise and probably even annoy a lot of you, but I don't really consider myself as a person who has opinions when it comes to subjects that are actually opinionated. Like, somebody was getting on me for this because I was talking about how you can have different standards for different people, and then somebody was like, no, you have the same standard, it just depends on who that person is. And I'm like, that's just 2 ways of saying the same thing. So whether or not morality is universal, and it just depends on the context of like what part of this universal truth you belong to, or whether or not there are separate truths based on like what context you're in, that's just a different way of categorizing the same thing. As long as nobody is making some convoluted argument that explicitly rejects basic observations and basic a priori facts, rejects reality as we know it, I don't care. So I think moral relativism is okay, especially since people need to understand that, like, if you are approaching morality from anything other than divine command theory, then what is best for people, either yourself or others, that is going to depend on the context in which you exist. And so if anything, a morally relative approach is probably better than a universalist approach, because universalism is how you get, like, people coming over and saying, oh, well, these Native Americans, they're backwards and they're, when it's like, no, they're a nomadic people, so of course they have nomadic values and traditions. They simply adapted to their environment, and this is their social adaptations. I don't really understand, other than like ideological commitment, I don't understand other than that why we've gotten to the point where it seems like the 2 sides are morality doesn't exist, or morality is this arbitrary thing that I read in a book that God gave us, and nobody understands anymore that, like, morality can be this abstract concept that comes from natural mechanisms without being subjective, without just being an opinion that we just made up. No, it can be this very real thing while still, not being universal and not being so rigid. And I think many people could interpret that as an attack on their religion, specifically Christianity, but like, no, I can't be attacking your religion, I'm just attacking your dogmatic approach to your religion. If you think that morality is this unchanging thing that comes from God, then why did God change his covenant with man? Why do you have like a very angry and jealous God in the Old Testament and a very loving and caring God in the New Testament? Well, unless you want to believe that the Bible is logically inconsistent or that God, this eternal being, changed somehow, the answer is that the material conditions of our world changed, and so morality changed. If you want to see that as morality never changed, it was just the conditions that necessitate what rules we follow within the same unchanging set of rules, and whatever, I don't care. It's a very convoluted way to explain it. I think it's just easier to say that morality is relative. What do you think about the recent Shiloh Hendrix situation? Well, if memory serves, that's where a woman on a playground called a black child the N-word. I don't know what these questions are. And this isn't even the question I was talking about where I may be a little mean. I mean, just like calling a child the N-word is bad? Like, I don't know what you guys expect me to say. This is kind of part of why I haven't really responded to these in videos, because like, I feel like it would be too short to make any of these just like one TikTok video response. And so I kind of need to put them together because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm supposed to say here. I guess I can be a little bit of a devil's advocate. I think it's weird that we live in a society where it's like you can kill a person and that's obviously not okay. But people are so desensitized to that it's just like, life as usual. But like, you commit the same crime and now it's a hate crime and that's so much worse. Like, I don't think I would care if somebody killed me because they were like, hey, look at that white mutt. He's clearly got a little bit of non-white in him. It's really just the same as killing me for any other reason. The same... the consequence in all of that is that I die, so why would I care which one it is, But, like, I'm not sure how that really applies here. Don't call kids the N-word. Like, I don't know what you want me to say. Final comment, and here's the one that I might be a little bit mean to. Genuine question, you said the laws in person should be similar to online ones. How would free speech laws be enforced in person? Not like fines or jail, because the damage has already been done. I don't know why this has become a trend in online debates, but you can't just put in parentheses, not the actual response to the question I'm asking. I don't want the actual response to the question I'm asking because I've already convinced myself that that's not the answer. So don't bother telling me the correct answer. It's like, okay, then at that point, just don't ask the question. If you know what the answer is, such that you have to put it in parentheses, then don't ask the question. And this is why I said that I'm going to have to be mean here, because this is so stupid and represents a mindset that is like really dangerous and is really ruining the ability of a lot of people to be able to like form coherent thoughts, especially regarding civics and the purpose of society. Because we think that prison is for rehabilitation. It's not. Nor is prison for punishment. Prison is to take people out of society and say, you're in timeout, go over here. That is the point of prison. That is the only point of prison. There is no other point. Like, we can say, yeah, it's good if people can be rehabilitated because then we can take them back into society and then they're functioning members of society once again. So you can kind of think of prison as being a place of rehabilitation. You can kind of think about how, people in society, there may be civil unrest if there is not some form of punishment, that people don't feel retribution for being wronged. But that is inconsequential to the fact that society is just about, like, preventing anarchy. That's the only point of law and order. Law and order is to prevent its opposite, anarchy. If people just killed each other, then people would kill each other, and, it'd be a horrible world. So we come together and we say, hey, don't kill each other. And if you break these laws, then you're no longer a part of our agreement. We're no longer going to protect you. We're going to say, you go over here. That's why societies used to exile people instead of imprisoning them, because it's the same concept. So it's such a stupid response to be like, well, not fines or jail, because the damage has already been done. How are you going to undo the damage? You think jail undoes stealing? When somebody steals from you and they pawn what they stole from you and you can't get it back, you think prison just magically grows it back or something? Like what? When somebody is murdered, you think that prison doesn't bring that person back, so we shouldn't put that person in prison? No, that is so stupid. I don't care if the harm has already been done. I don't care if laws against extremism and violent incitement don't undo the damage that has been done. That's not the point. The point is to prevent them from doing more of it. It may deter people from doing it. It may, but that is not the point. The point is to prevent them from doing it more. And so 100% prisons and fines accomplish that. Now, if you want a more specific answer, I think we need to go less after the people committing these crimes, the people who incite violence. I mean, we should obviously still go after them if they incite violence, but we should care less about, like, did your conservative uncle share misinformation on Facebook? Because that's how censorship got weaponized. But just like when we look to the UK and we see people who are being arrested for offensive speech, that's not what I want. I think we just need to hold platforms more accountable for allowing violent and extremist rhetoric. Like you look to Hassan Piker, and he's literally a terrorist sympathizer. He said that we deserve 9/11. He said all these horrible things. He's called for violence against people. And then Twitch just slaps him on the wrist. It may not sound like a good idea in theory to say that, these platforms should moderate the content that's put on them, because then you can say, well, how do you know that YouTube won't come after you? Well, there was already a time when YouTube came after people like me. It's just, and I mean, this kind of gets back to the whole parentheses of, don't give me the answer about how society actually works, where a lot of people don't want to realize that, like, when people are not willing to work out their differences, then it becomes just who's stronger. That's really all it is. Not because Marxism is true and conflict theory is true, but because, like, a quote, for example, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one group, that's the fundamentals of our country, and we seem to forget that. You guys will berate me and you'll be like, oh, you think free speech should have more limitations placed on it? That's not what our founding fathers would have wanted. Our founding fathers went to war because they didn't like the price of tea. Our founding fathers 100% would not tolerate terrorists living in our society and just go, well, that's their free speech. So you've got to realize that the entire point of society is associating with like-minded individuals and separating yourself from individuals who do not share your same values. It is about collaboration. And when you have people who refuse to collaborate with you, who refuse to work together towards a common goal of making your society better, throw them in prison, exile them, deport them, I don't care. They don't want to sit at the table, so don't give them a seat at the table. And don't go, oh, well, they've already incited violence, so what are you going to accomplish? I'm going to accomplish them not inciting more violence is what I'm going to accomplish. Many of us seem to forget that is already a law. You cannot incite violence. That is already a criminal offense. But people get away with it because you guys leave comments like this. What are you going to do? Fine them? Put them in jail? Yes! That's what you're supposed to do. Oh my god! Anyways, before I have an aneurysm, I think a lot of those were good comments. Some of them were, what do you think of this woman calling a kid the N-word? Do you support eugenics? What should we do to criminals besides throw them in prison because that's not an answer? Some of them were interesting. I know that when I ridicule and make fun of your comments, that doesn't exactly encourage you to leave more of them. But if you guys have any burning questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Give this video a like, subscribe, all that people do before ending a video, because if you just keep talking and then end in the middle of a sentence, that's not very cathartic.